Welcome to the Youth Sport Podcast. My name is Rihanna Poskin, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly within youth sport. It feels great when a kid comes up to you and says, "Coach, because of you, my life changed in the best way." It would feel awful to hear that because of you, the coach, a kid doesn't want to have anything to do with it ever again. I believe that kids deserve to have fun, to learn, to grow, to compete, and to play in a great environment. Join me as I interview guests that spill the tea on youth sport in order to help you make an enormous impact with kids right now. This episode of the Youth Sport Podcast is brought to you by Lululemon. I am part of the Lululemon Collective and will receive commissions when you shop through my link. Buying something for you or your loved ones, like my favorite warm down joggers, helps me to continue to bring interesting and empowering conversations for everyone. I have to tell you, when I'm coaching, I want to make sure that I'm dressed appropriately, I'm comfortable, my clothes stand up to all kinds of random situations, and that I have pockets. You never know who's going to ask you to hold something for them or what random things you need to carry with you. The Lululemon warm down joggers take care of all of my needs. I invite you to find your go-to item by browsing through the entire Lululemon site. You won't be disappointed. Please use the link provided in the video description below to start shopping. Welcome to another episode of the Youth Sport Podcast. I am really excited today. I have a great friend on. Her name is Sarah Zinkie. Sarah is many things to many people. To me, she's a great friend. Sarah played sports her whole life, which led her to continue her love of sport by becoming a phys ed teacher. Sarah doesn't limit her love of teaching to daytime school time. She coaches many sports, often stepping up when kids would not have a coach otherwise. She's a yoga teacher, not only at school, but in her community. She volunteers as a manager for one of her two sons' hockey teams. And just recently, she took her passion for nutrition and completed a holistic nutrition course where she, again, wants to give back and help others in yet another way. First, I'd like to say thank you to Sarah for her constant impact in making the lives of others better around her. You're an awesome person, Sarah. And before we get started, I want to tell a quick story of how we met. So Sarah and I go back 10 years now, a little bit over 10 years, because that's how old our kids are, our oldest kid. And I remember being at a baby group, and it was hilarious because when you have your first baby, you get a ton of presents. And well, okay, so maybe not everybody, but fortunately, I was in a really amazing position where people were very generous. And I got all of these tiny little cute outfits that had multiple pieces to them, the matching socks with the matching pants and everything. And my kid just wouldn't sit still long enough for me to be able to put all of these things on. And I tried really hard. I tried to make an effort so that when I went to play groups, I looked like I was a mom that was put together. And so Sarah and I were at this group, and there were some moms who were really well put together. Makeup is good, hair is good, babies look perfect. And then I kind of look over and there's this mom who's constantly moving and her baby's in a sleeper. And I was like, you know what? That is the way to go. You don't have to worry about these tiny little shoes that fall off all the time, all these little socks that are going to get lost, and your baby's super comfortable. And so I was drawn to Sarah and I was just thinking, yeah, that's totally what I need to be doing, is just go with the sleepers. And then as we got to know each other more, I remember Sarah as being the woman that would just constantly run. She was running around the neighborhood trying to get her baby to sleep as long as possible while she was able to get her workouts in. And it was just a really huge inspiration for me that parenting looks different for everybody. And my child was also on the go, not sleeping well, not napping well, and I was struggling with that. So knowing that Sarah was doing her bit, trying to keep up with her very active and busy son, who was really 7 months at the time. It was
He started crawling at 6 months.
Yeah. So
walking at 9. Walking at 9.
So basically the only time that you would be able to strap him down and get your own stuff in was when he was napping and you were running. And right. Yeah. So we hit it off right from the beginning and then had a bunch of awesome play dates from there. And we would just be able to swap stories about, how our kids were just a little bit different from those kids who were happy laying in their precious mom's arms while they watched HGTV for hours. And that was so foreign, so foreign to me, where it's like, ah. Anyway, so thank you for being my friend over these years and for us to be able to share all these different experiences.
Totally. The feeling's mutual. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Oh, no worries. I'm excited to chat with you because you've done so much for the community. You've learned so much over the years, and you're going to be able to help a lot of people out. So let's go back to your earlier days. And what was youth sport like for you growing up?
Um, so my dad came from a very poor family, and because of that, he never had the opportunity to play sports, and he never learned how to skate. He never learned how to swim, and then fast forward to him as an adult, he can't skate with us as a family. He's scared to swim, basically. So it was really, really important to him that both my brother and I had the ability to skate and swim. Those were absolutely non-negotiable. So he actually prioritized that over sport. He's just like, you need to know how to skate, you need to know how to swim. End of. So my mom, she stayed home with us for quite a while, and she took my brother and I, obviously, to those mom and taught swim lessons from the very beginning. And the first sport I actually did was figure skating because of the influence of my dad and wanting me to learn how to skate. Now, keep in mind, it was the 90s, well, 80s, 90s as I'm growing up. And I lived in a very small community. There was no girls' hockey at the time. My parents just would never think of like putting me into boys' hockey or driving a little bit further to do. It was just a different time. They would never think of doing something like that. So I was limited from that level. But as the years went on, I just kept playing more and more and more sports. I didn't really get involved in the team sports per se until more high school, where I really realized I loved them in high school. And then I went out into the community and did more of it. But it's almost like it was too late at that point to become really good. But at the same time, I'm just so grateful for the opportunity that I had in sport. I did a lot of things though. I did music, drama. I did all these things. It wasn't just like I was focused entirely on sports. I actually went to a drama school for a little while. And I think that that's kind of what my parents' goal was, is they wanted me to be more well-rounded and have exposure to a lot of different things in comparison to just being a star at one. Now, do I agree with their philosophy? I don't know. I know that my parents did the best they could in the time that they could. And my dad's not athletic. My dad's very artsy. My mom claims she's athletic. She wrote me an email today telling me that she won athletic awards in high school because she was sad I thought she wasn't athletic. um, but anyways, it's not a strong athletic background at all. My dad didn't play sports until he went to RMC, and then he was forced to have exposure at RMC. So definitely my parents came from a different background.
Yeah, so you had mentioned to me before that you weren't always the best on the team, but you were just really happy to be a part of the team. And so I think that's important because so many kids are probably in the same situation where they just want to belong to something. So what did that mean to you to be a part of it?
Yeah, so don't forget I'm from a very small town, right? So when you try out for a team, you kind of make the team. Although you felt really proud of yourself still for making that team. The people on your team lived 5 doors down in every direction of where you lived. So everything was very community based.
Yeah.
You went from playing basketball to playing volleyball to playing soccer, all these different, we traveled together as a group to each team. So it was awesome, like totally awesome. I made tons of friends, but some of these people were my friends from grade 2 that I was playing with. So the bond that we had was incredible. I also kind of thought I was good at the time, maybe too.
Okay.
Like I felt like I was like okay. It
Yeah.
wasn't really until I left the small town that I was like, whoa, like I'm not like I'm not very good. But in my head, I was just having so much fun. We lost a ton. Like we lost almost every game. I remember once we made it to South Kawartha and we thought we were just amazing. We got destroyed at South Kawartha, like absolutely destroyed. But we were just so happy that we made it because we'd never done so well before.
Yeah.
So we played, and then I played community soccer, community basketball, all that sort of stuff. But it was always still with the same people. So
Cool.
you can only imagine the friendships that I had and the bonds that I created. yeah, it was really the best. It was the best.
Yeah. So your memories, would it be more the social side and just being with your friends as opposed to the wins and the losses along the way?
I think so. I mean, I love to compete.
Yeah.
I have a fairly competitive personality, so I like to compete. I also, one of my favorite experiences was, I think it might have been grade 9 or 10ish. My friend Heidi and I went to play in a mixed basketball league.
Okay.
So, and there were very few girls. And that was my favorite experience because I could actually see myself improving. I could see myself getting better. The coaching was great. We played games because there were so few girls. All the parents were on our side. They were like rooting for the girls, you know. and
Yeah. Yeah.
and I still have those friendships with those boys and girls at that time. And again, it was my friend Heidi and I did the drama together. We did the co-ed basketball together. We did everything together.
Awesome. I have a similar
Mhm.
memory, actually. I didn't even think about it until you brought that up, where I went to a camp in Toronto. I didn't know anybody because I was far away from Toronto, and mostly boys in the camp. And so, you're intimidated because you don't know many people.
For
But I,
sure.
I specifically remember one of the coaches, and I made a play, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, "You know how you did this thing? Well, because of that, this happened, and that never would have happened in a positive way had you not done this." And, like that was a long time ago now, but just those little things that when someone says something that's really kind and they
Mhm.
take the time to put you in a safe position when you're uncomfortable and just tell you that you've done something good, it doesn't, I mean, there's no way that I was rocking the whole camp and was
Mhm.
outmaneuvering all the boys by any means, but it was just something where it boosted my confidence at the time. So, yeah, it's really special when someone does recognize you. And just like what you said with the other parents, it was obvious. Like there were only a few girls there, right? So to have that extra support behind you feels really good.
100%. I would say for sure it was a confidence thing. Like it just made you feel like you were doing something good and you felt good about yourself and then in turn it actually makes you like the sport more too.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes you want to come back. And I think that's the goal
Mhm.
for all of us is how can
Yeah,
we get kids to just keep coming back?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So, did sport ever help you get over any challenges as a young person?
Well, I think as being a young person and being female, there can be lots of drama at different times with your
For sure.
friends. And
Yep.
I think that there's obstacles in your life along the way. And I think that if it wasn't for sport, I think I would have been a much worse place.
Okay.
Now, to be honest, I think that we all need something. So, I mean, the music student who is doing an instrument, the drama who's in theater, me who's doing sports, I think they're all the same. You need that outlet. You need that place where you belong.
Yeah.
And I think for me, if I didn't have sports, I would have been my mental health wouldn't have been as good, and I know that.
Yeah.
Sports allowed me to have a space to escape. It allowed me to take my mind off things, and it overall made me feel more balanced. Like I just felt like when you do school all day, and sometimes it's like a sitting school, like math or science or whatever,
Yeah.
you need that outlet at the end of the day. And we'd have practices after school. Like I remember I worked at a grocery store when I was in high school. And I would literally have a practice. I would get picked up at 5 to 4. My shift started at 4. I
Uh-huh.
would get to the grocery store all sweaty and disgusting. I didn't care. I'm like, I'm playing sports and I'm working. I'm doing this. And I remember at first I was like kind of embarrassed because my face is red as I'm starting my shift, but that's how important it was to me. I was not missing sports. I tried to do it all and make it all fit, and I needed the sports to get me through some of the more challenging times that I went through.
Yeah, for sure. And now that well, I'm going to come back to this, but this made me think of it now, but your yoga training. So I want
Yeah,
to ask you a few questions about that. And part of your yoga training obviously is mindfulness and meditation. And it made me think about how sport can also be a form of meditation, even though it's not sitting.
yeah,
And
100%. Yeah.
that's what I find is really cool because I have a hard time just sitting there and relaxing my brain and forgetting about my thoughts. That's really hard for me. Just everything is going all at once. So with sport, I think just what you touched upon with it being a great thing for mental health, when you're focused on so my sport was soccer primarily. If I'm running and I have the mindset to chase the ball down or keep an eye on my defender or listen to my coach, I'm not thinking about anything else
That's
because
right.
right now I'm in the zone of just this one thing. And
Yeah.
I think for so many of the kids that I've worked with, they've said to me before where they've said, this is my 1 hour where I don't have to worry about my homework. I don't have to worry about, like you mentioned, the drama between maybe friends. I can just go and do my thing and just take a break. And
Yeah.
it's a really cool way. So if someone's not a very good meditative person, they can tap into it in a different kind of a way.
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually one thing I wanted to touch on. One of my just a little story here where when I was in OAC, there were no sports. So
Okay.
that's great. That's grade 13. It was a political thing where teachers weren't coaching. They were doing a work to a rule at the time.
Yeah.
And so I've already alluded to the fact that I worked at the grocery store. So what would happen is I would no longer be having these sports after school. And Value Mart at the time had a really nice individually packaged butter tart.
Okay.
And so I went from doing sports every single day to eating butter tarts and not doing anything.
Okay.
And I learned a lot of things during that time. Number one, how important fitness is because some of my pants were no longer fitting.
Okay.
I also noticed my mental health wasn't the same.
Mm-hmm.
I also noticed that I missed my friends.
Yeah.
I noticed all sorts of things during that time period. And that really was a pivotal point in my life because I knew how important sports and fitness were in that moment.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a big time for me. Like I learned a lot about myself.
And that's kind of what the kids are going through right now because they don't
100%.
have extracurriculars. And I'm the same age as you. So I went through a similar situation my last year. And I remember I had classes that started at 8:15, three classes in a row, and my spare was at the end of the day. So I started at 8:15, finished at 12:15, and I was done. And
Yeah.
there was nothing for me to hang around at school for, no games to get ready for. And there are a
Yeah.
lot of times where I would get up in the morning and be like, yeah, I'm not really feeling school right now. And I was a good student, but because I had a game at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, I knew I had to attend school.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
actually just talking to a dad at the arena the other night, and he was saying that his son isn't really sure what he's going to do next year. And he really loves football, and he might just come back to school for an extra year just to be able to play football. But that may not happen for him. So,
No.
like all of these different situations that kids are in right now is really challenging.
Well, and just touching on that particular person you're talking about, quite a few students come back for a fifth year just for sports.
Yeah.
And if they're kind of questioning it and they talk to me and they ask me for advice, I'm always like 100% come back for that fifth year because you're not going to regret it.
Yeah.
Sports are the best time of your life. You're going to love your life and you're going to be working for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So like from this point on, you're going to have a job. You're not going to be playing as many sports potentially. Like you got to embrace this moment and coming back for 1 year is nothing. I mean, we did that 1 year anyways. Like when we were in high school, we did that extra year.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm like, embrace it, love it, come back, play the sports. You're never going to regret it.
Yeah, my university coach, he would always say, one of these days, you're going to wake up dead.
Yeah.
He would always like,
That's pretty blunt.
he's like, these
True.
are the best years of your lives. You better enjoy it. And
So
obviously,
true.
we have really good years, with different things, with,
Mm-hmm.
having a person that you fall in love with, or having children if that's your path, or finding something that you're really passionate with in your career. But
Yeah.
yeah, for a lot of those athletes, if you're not going on to playing in college or professionally, those are your years. So you
Yeah.
really want to take advantage of it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you knew from a young age that you were going to be a teacher. How did that come about?
Well, my dad's a principal, my mom was a teacher, so it's like I kind of didn't know any better. And I just knew that that's what my passion was. So when I was in high school, a lot of things were on paper more. So I would have certificates for winning things, or I would have different awards. And my dad told me from a very young age, he's like, you got to create a portfolio. You got to create a portfolio. So I actually already had this portfolio created by the time I finished high school. And ended up using it to get my job as a teacher. And I just knew my dad is such a big role model in my life too. And he really had a passion for his job and loved his job. And I kind of was just like, this is what I'm doing. And then when I got to high school, so I guess I knew in kindergarten I wanted to be a teacher, but it wasn't until I got to like grade 9 that I knew I wanted to be a gym teacher.
Okay.
And that was kind of solidified by different role models in my life at the time. And I just knew that that was my career path. Now, that being said, when I went to McMaster in kinesiology and went to get my degree, I tried to be as open-minded to other careers as possible, and I just couldn't get the teacher thing out of my mind. So
Yeah.
so I've always known.
Nice.
Yeah.
You did mention something that I wanted to touch upon,
Yeah.
and just with you going through and having different influences in your life, who were those influences, if you want to talk about them, or it could be good or bad. Were there coaches
Yeah.
that were super impactful in a great way, or did you have any negative experiences going through?
I would say both. There was a gym teacher, her name was Miss Beef, and she was tough on us,
Yeah.
super tough. She was an old school teacher, old school gym teacher, and she was really tough on us. And she coached me in grade 9 basketball. And she was also my gym teacher too, but she taught me basketball. And she was tough on us, but she knew what she was talking about. She was really skill focused. And that year I did win MVP for basketball, but I doubt it was based on necessarily my skill, maybe more on my passion. And because the harder she worked me, the more she got from me. So I remember doing a press break and I was like, whoa, we're doing this press break. This is awesome. Like I've never learned anything like this before. But she would yell at you and be stern with you. And she wasn't overly friendly with you either.
Yeah.
And you didn't know if she liked you. She was like one of those people like, oh, does she like me? If not like me, I'm not sure. I'm scared to say this, but maybe I can say this. Like, she had that old school mentality.
Yeah.
But then as I continued to go through high school, to be honest, I didn't have great coaches. They were not good at all. Maybe nice. They were nice, but they didn't have the background of the sport. They were just being nice people because otherwise we wouldn't have had a coach.
Right.
And that's why I never really improved that much until I went into that mixed basketball league, because we weren't being taught. We weren't being taught at all.
Yeah.
And that always made me really sad. I was like, oh, if I had just had good coaches,
Right.
could I have been better, done better, or reached my full potential in sport?
Right.
But it just wasn't like that. And my parents, I don't think, thought a lot about the community with me. Like they thought more school, school, school. So now there was a curriculum chair as well. He never coached me, but his name was Jeff Kozenak, and he later went along to become a principal. And he was a curriculum chair at phys ed, and that I knew that that's what I wanted to be, was the curriculum chair at phys ed, and that is what I ended up becoming in the end.
Awesome.
But like he just had such a passion for his job, and he loved it, and he coached a ton, and I just knew I wanted to be him.
So do you feel like part of your purpose now, because I know that you're a very busy person, but before COVID, you were trying to help as much as possible.
Yeah.
And does this factor into your upbringing as well, that you want to just give kids an opportunity?
Yes, 100%. So when I coach now, I research, I plan my practices. It's like having another class, right?
Yeah.
I plan, I research, I prep, because I want them to have the best experience, and potentially the experience I didn't have. And my role model, Miss Beast, she ended up coaching a couple of grades, 1 or 2 grades younger than us, because they were actually successful. They actually won a lot, and they were a great athletic group. And she always said to me, she's like, no, I think I'm just going to coach these girls. I don't have time to do both teams. And now I actually kind of get it. Like, she actually just wanted to have a winning team, and she wanted to coach that winning team, and she had a lot of pride in that. And I kind of get that. At the time, I don't think I really understood what her mentality was, but now being in her shoes, I kind of get more of what she was thinking at the time. I was so mad at her though. I'm like, I just want you to coach me.
Well, I remember kids, even you were telling me about the kids that you coach when you went on mat leave, that it was similar with you, where the girls had a hard time with you taking the time off, because it's such a hard cycle where you start with a group, and then chances are you're going to be working with them for 2 to 4 years at least, right?
Yeah. So I planned my pregnancy around a team.
Did you really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I planned it in the sense that, like, when a certain group graduated, I was going to have a baby. Oh. And so Jackson was born on June 12th. The athletic banquet was like June 10th. And that was the day I was done work.
Oh my goodness, you are just like, it fits your personality so perfectly that all of this just fell in line. It's like, this is what I needed to happen. This is exactly how it's going to play out. And we're just going to make it work.
Yeah. I'm like, Jackson can't come early. Like, that's not possible. This is what's happening.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, your coaching style, do you
Yeah.
coach in a certain way because of how you were coached before, or do you just have your own way?
I would say I definitely put more effort into it
Yeah.
in the planning part of things
Yeah.
because, well, I kind of alluded to that before. Like, I definitely put a lot more effort into it. I
Yeah.
also try to be really personable because that's something that I think is really important.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say I've definitely been influenced by my past coaches. I want the girls to improve and have fun and just really enjoy themselves. So
Yeah. Oh, that's
and
awesome.
and we have gone to offices together. So that was part of my pregnancy planning too. I we wanted to go to we were our goal was to get to OFSA and we went to OFSA a few years and then during that time I also organized an OFSA at our school. So there was just stuff that I had to get done, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what you're doing now. You're a high school phys ed teacher, a yoga instructor, a mom of two boys playing youth sport, a volunteer team manager, and a volunteer high school coach of many sports. I don't think you can add anything more to your plate, but you just did. You just completed a course in holistic nutrition and will be helping clients with lifestyle goals. That's amazing. I understand that talking about certain areas of these things that you're currently doing is confidential. So, without breaching your trust between your students and your children's team sport families, I'd like to get an understanding of some general things that we can learn about what's going on right now in young people's lives. So, let's first dive into the high school scene. How are your students doing with the pandemic?
I would say that it's different for everyone.
Hmm.
I would say that there's definitely different reactions that are happening in when there was no school at all. So when we were out of like total lockdown, so we still had a service available at the school where you could offer out people's names who you felt like you were struggling.
Okay,
And that would go to like our social worker or whatever. And what we noticed was an increase in athletes.
interesting.
Yeah, so it really hurt the athletes a lot. I found their mental health just not having things to do that they were normally doing. So we
Right.
found an increase in that. I find that now that we're back at school, there are obviously no sports. I know one particular student who he identifies with being a football player and an athlete, and he's definitely going through something right now. It's very challenging for him.
Yeah.
Now, as far as some of the other students go, I find they're kind of some are annoyed with the rules. Some of them don't want to wear their masks properly. Some are scared. I
Okay.
find some think that it's no big deal. Like it's such a wide spectrum of things.
Yeah.
A lot of the students just talk about how they want normalcy. They just want it to go back to normal. That's it. They just want it to be normal. Now, another interesting thing that I found, so in my yoga class, they were writing reflections for me, and I learned a lot about students. And
Okay.
one of the things that really hit me was that a lot of our students were working. They were at Walmart, they were at the grocery stores, they were at these places that were essential.
Yeah.
And some of these students had no choice but to work because their parents got laid off.
Oh, wow.
And to me, that was just like tragic.
Yeah.
Another one of my students, I read this in a reflection too. Her mom is a nurse, and obviously the daughter was experiencing a lot of emotions about that,
Yeah.
and she was also part of the last pandemic as well, like with the whole SARS stuff.
Okay.
And so I think she was just so sad all the time. She was worried about her mom and didn't know how that was going to go and if she would get sick and if she was safe. So there were a lot of people like that as well.
Yeah.
So I think there was a ton of emotion going on, and when someone didn't hand in an assignment or wasn't connecting with you, I found myself reaching out right away because I had to figure out why they weren't handing in an assignment, because often it's not to do with not wanting to do the assignment, it was other things.
Yeah. And we've talked before, so you've been doing this a while. How many
Mm-hmm.
years now have you been running the yoga program in the high school?
I think so. I got certified in 2015. So I would guess September of 2015, I started it.
Okay, and that's a pretty cool thing because not many schools have a yoga program in their school.
That's
And
right. You get a gym credit for it.
that's great. Some of the things that you do in the yoga class are not just about stretching and moving and breathing. Like you mentioned, I'm sorry, you didn't call it journaling. What did you call it? Reflections?
Yeah, same thing.
Okay. And I remember you saying before even the COVID time that you would give the students the option to either share or not share these.
Mhm.
What are you noticing now? Are kids wanting to share with you just so that?
Even before they wanted to share. So
Okay.
what's interesting is that kids want to share. They just don't know how to share.
Okay.
So some of the stuff that they're journaling about, they don't want to tell you it to your face kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
embarrassing for them, or maybe they're going through something, or maybe they're having a fight with someone or whatever. They just don't want to talk about it with you to your face, but they actually do want to be heard still.
Okay.
So what I find is that I'll say you, because at first they're like, what? I have to like journal about my life and something personal or whatever. And
Yeah.
I'm always like, no, 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 actually, you don't have to journal about your life if you don't want to. You can actually journal about what you did over the weekend, or you could journal about something a lot more fluffy. It doesn't have to be something traumatic or sad or whatever.
Right.
But oftentimes there's something going on with them, even if it's little. And at the end of the day, they basically all share with me. And
That's
I certainly make sure I read every single journal entry.
yeah.
There's
And
like no skipping over things.
I was going to say, how do you manage that? Because as a healthcare practitioner, you're trained to take on that emotion and then
Yeah.
also in a way to not let that manifest within you. And
Yeah.
so it can weigh quite heavily on your personal life. And
Yep.
that would go beyond your scope of a teacher. But I think it's a really amazing thing that you're doing this. How do you handle that?
I think I just have my own self care practices, and I try not to take things personally, and I try to let things go right away. The only time I wouldn't let it go right away is if I felt like I needed to take it one step further, like actually talk to the student, or maybe refer them to the social worker, or put them on the student success list or whatever. Like I just try to be there for to listen to them, but use my own personal self care practices to just let it go.
Okay. And now, if there's a young person listening right now that
Yeah.
doesn't have Mrs. Zinke that's offering her time to read the journals, what do you
Yeah.
think you could suggest for a young person to handle these kinds of things?
I think I think we need to start educating, and I think it is happening in the schools. We need to start educating people as young as possible, having these coping strategies. And I know it is happening. Like my kids are finally, they're coming home saying that they're doing yoga or they've done yoga. One of my sons had every single day has this time for meditation, and you have choices of what you can do in that time. So it's not like you have to do this; it's a choice thing. So
Okay.
I think teaching children young is the key. I really do.
Same with our kids as well, where they were just homeschooling, and my daughter, who's 5, had a devoted 15 minutes of mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about different breathing techniques, and she said, well, let me show you the alligator breath. And then
Mm-hmm.
she said, and then there's the kangaroo breath. And I'm like, this is amazing. And so she was really pumped about it. And then it's also, again, a super cool tool that she can access for the rest of her life and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully teach other people. Like, I could imagine even them going on the playground and not even thinking about it and being like, oh, that kid's upset. Maybe we should do alligator breathing with them.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's pretty cool. And most people, I would say, are not going to be doing therapy until their adult years.
yeah,
So to be able to have struggle as a young person and to be able to have ways of creating an outlet where you're not going to hold that in is
yeah.
pretty powerful. So I really appreciate what you're doing with the young people. That's great.
Yeah, I think the more that this is implemented into our curriculum, the better. And so I actually did teach a religion course last year too. And I really tried to implement meditation into that as well. So I think the more we see it, the more familiar we come with it, the more we'll use it. Um, and honestly, from that point, it's just practice, right?
Right.
And
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
no, it's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, a lot of people get nervous about the word religion if they're not a
Yeah,
religious person. And I think that there's a fascinating correspondence that I've been reading about lately where there's a very common denominator across a lot of different religions in terms of breath work and spirituality and how even counts. So it was specifically with the rosary that it is designed in a way where when you're saying it, you're actually breathing.
yeah,
And those breaths correspond with what researchers are saying is the optimal inhale and exhale within a certain amount of time for you to be able
yeah,
to calm and center yourself.
yeah.
Do you know about this? Because I'm
I
just
do.
learning
I
about it.
do actually. Yeah. And
Okay.
so I'm going to draw a blank here on the name, but the necklace in yoga. Anyways, the yoga necklace, the beads on it
Yeah.
are very, very similar to the rosary.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And so
So
maybe
it's,
for someone that's not super religious, but tapping into some kind of a like a counting thing or a meditative thing, there are associated ways of doing that without having to be religious.
well, I think it's more of a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Spirituality, I think, is all encompassing, maybe. And I think it's proven really that spirituality is a pillar to health.
A lot of the spiritual side of things is actually having proper breath work
Yeah.
and there are different names for it. So it could be qi in traditional Chinese
Yeah.
medicine,
Yeah.
prana, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Prana. Yeah.
So then that's your life force and trying to
That's right.
figure out how you can make sure that you are balancing all of that within you in order to be the strongest person that you can be.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super cool. Okay, let's jump into some of the youth or high school sports that you
Okay.
are coaching. Just
Okay.
for someone that's working with a specific gender, now you coach everybody. So do you have tips on a specific gender? Do you have anything that's different even between coaching girls and coaching boys?
Oh, it is very different.
Okay, tell me.
Um, so girls are very social beings, right? So not that boys aren't, but girls thrive on potluck potlucks. Like so within my basketball season, we always have a potluck. We have a Christmas at Christmas time we would do a Secret Santa.
Okay.
Girls just like that dynamic. They just want to make it more and bigger. So basketball would be just part of it, but we need all the other stuff too.
Okay.
I even hosted a few Christmas parties at my house for my basketball team and stuff like that. They love that. Boys, they're just like, oh, let's just play. Let's play. Like,
Okay.
and then they're like, after the game's over, it's over. They go home, they do whatever, and it's done. They don't. If I said to the boys, "Oh, let's do a potluck," they'd be like, "What?" So that's one thing that I've really I find the potlucks really unite the girls too. Like it's
Yeah.
different. It brings them together and it's very different.
Yeah.
Whereas the boys may be like, oh, let's just go play pickup now at the basketball court. Like it's just different socially.
Yeah.
I'd also say that boys, if I'm talking basketball again, with boys, it would be like, okay, get it in check here. Stop taking all these threes and missing.
Yeah.
Whereas with girls, it'd be like, come on, you got this. You can take the three. You got
Okay.
this. You can do it. Because they're always more timid and been like, oh, I don't know if I should do this. I might miss. I might la la la. Whereas the boy would be like eighth shot and still missing. And they're like, I can. They have more of an I can personality, whereas the girls have more of like I can't personality.
Right.
So those are some of the big differences that I've noticed. Boys like to think strategy a lot. So do the girls, I guess, but the boys are just like, this is what we're doing wrong. This is what we're doing wrong. Whereas the girls are like, well, maybe we should try this or maybe we should try that. And so it's just they're just very different, but equally fun to coach.
Yeah. And what's your strategy for discipline, if any, when there's conflicts or issues on the team?
Um, I guess it depends on the conflict or the issue, how I deal with it. Have I benched people? Yes.
Yeah.
I think that since I've had kids, I've become a little bit softer.
Okay.
But I guess it really depends on the situation as how I would deal with the conflict. I think it depends. Is it a social conflict or is it a sport conflict? And is it an effort issue? Is it a like what's the issue? You know. So I think it just depends on how I've handled it. But I have benched people. I have talked to people. I have rearranged lineups. I've done all sorts of different things to kind of.
Well, I think that's a great answer
manage it.
because you can't just say exactly what you're going to do all the time. And so
Yeah,
analyzing what's actually going on, and especially because you're talking to these kids outside of the sport, you're in the classroom with them, you might know that there's something going on at home as well. So taking care of that kid, from the sport side of things is going to be very personal in terms
yeah,
of how you're going to be treating them. So it's a cool
for sure.
relationship that you've got with these guys. They're so lucky.
Well, thank you.
So you're also a mom of two, and you do everything for your boys as well. And I'm so
Maybe too
impressed.
much.
But you know what? When they look back, they're gonna be like, my mom always had my back. Your husband is amazing too, and so they'll say, my dad always had my back too. So that your kids are in a great family dynamic. You are volunteering with with the older one's hockey team as a manager, and that can be tricky. There's always different dynamics with adults on a team. So let's talk about that a little bit without, causing drama where people might find out something that they weren't supposed to find out because you know more than other people.
Mhm.
What would you say to somebody who's working with a team in order to just keep things pretty civil and think about the kids more than the adult drama that might come with it?
Yeah. So first of all, I always feel like I'm very lucky. There wasn't much parent drama. We all get along really well. So I feel like I was in a situation that that I feel lucky to be part of. Everyone likes each other, everyone gets along. Now, I will say that because I have another child, I don't go to everything. So I'm not always at the arena, I'm not always present, which means that I'm not always in all the conversations, which might be for the best.
Yeah.
I also think that you have to surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
And I feel like through the hockey community, I am surrounded by good people. I can tell you with my oldest son, if my oldest son ever went somewhere with hockey or made it, like did something special with hockey, I can only take credit for part of it. Like my husband and I, we always talk about how he's just been surrounded by such amazing people, and that has been really good for him. People
Yeah.
have always been very good to our family.
Yeah.
So I also think it it's really important to keep expectations in check
Hmm.
and really be mindful of those expectations. And I can kind of say, like, my one son loves hockey, is lives and breathes hockey, wants to be there every day. He is there every day and wants to be like, he loves it, right?
Yeah.
So my expectations for him are a little bit different than my younger son, who likes it but doesn't love it.
Okay.
And for me, my expectations for him is that he's getting exercise, he's being part of a team, he's learning how a team dynamic works. He It's all those social skills. So expectations being in check, I think, are really important to manage the people, the environment, all that sort of stuff. I kind of have this saying, and a couple of years ago, I went through a bit of a time, and I really started to realize that people are doing the best they can. People are doing the best they can with the skill set they have.
Yeah.
And I always remember that. So if I don't like something or if something's bothering me, I always try to think about, okay, well, maybe this is happening, or maybe they're coming out saying something because this is the best that they can do. And I just really try to take the higher road. And I always remember that people are doing the best with the skill set they have.
That's an awesome way to look at it. I was just listening to Chelsea Handler. She's got a new comedy special that just came out,
Yeah.
and her issue was empathy. So she had to
Yeah.
learn what empathy was. So I kind of feel like that's what you're describing right now is, can you picture what someone else is going through, and can you actually feel what that might feel like, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore base your judgments around that. And so just making the other person really human. I think that's,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And my principal, actually, he's a very smart man. And this week coming up is anti-bullying week,
Okay.
but we call it intentional courtesy.
Oh, interesting. So you changed the
So
perspective.
yes, and he always talks about how you don't know what other people are going through, and to be kind to the sad, lonely, and even mad. Like, that's his philosophy, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I really think it's smart, because bullying is kind of a negative word, right?
Yeah.
So you flip that around to intentional courtesy. being kind to all,
Yeah.
and it completely changes the dynamic of it.
I like that. I like that a lot. So your kids are in a lot of different sports. You touched along the lines of why that is important. What do you feel like is important since you not only played sports, you coach sports, and now your kids are involved in it? Will you want them to stay in it? Like even if they don't have a love for it, how will you go about that if someone says, it's not really my thing anymore? Do you feel like it's important enough to keep them involved?
I'm never going to make my kid do something he hates.
Yeah.
Never. But on the flip side of that, okay, so you're going to quit hockey. So what are you going to do instead?
Okay.
Because my biggest concern is that if you have nothing, or you're not part of something, or you're not in a group, or you're not, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to turn to video games? Are you going to turn to drugs? Are you going to turn to, like, for me, I think it's so important to just be involved and be part of something
Yeah.
that fits you.
Right.
So for example, my second son, not to brag, I find him very smart.
Yes.
And and he's very smart. So maybe in his pathway, we're looking at robotics, or we're looking at coding. I also know from my high school, and I'm picturing a specific kid in my head. He was terrible at hockey, knows he was terrible at hockey. That always kind of bothered him. He would have probably have described himself as like a non-athlete, like totally not sporty at all. Okay. Got to high school in grade 9, started playing football, and now is playing university football.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Right? So you really need to be open-minded. Like, I can't just be like, well, my son doesn't like hockey, like life's over. No, yeah. Like there's opportunity moving forward, right? There's high school sports moving forward. There's badminton moving forward. There's swimming. There's like all these different things. And some of these sports do come later, like football comes later, right? So I think it's just always thinking about your child's best interest, and thinking outside of the box sometimes, and never really like writing them off because something could come of it.
Yeah, and that's why you're a very good mom.
Well, I try. And then there's so many examples of these people who, like, there was a kid who was, I don't know, 300 pounds.
Yep.
And not a non-athlete, and he gets to high school, and we're like, man, you'd be a great lineman, like you're in. And all of a sudden now they're playing football, and their whole identity changes, and they feel so confident and good about themselves. And
they have a purpose.
Yeah. And that guy became athlete of the year at our school.
Oh, awesome.
Right? Like there's just so many stories, like your career. And my other son, who's doing exceptionally well in hockey, who knows what will even happen to him down the road, right? Like, does he get injured? Does puberty not go well for him? Like, there's all these things that happen. Maybe he falls in love with football too. Yeah. My husband coaches football, right? So like, there's just so much room for change in the next few years.
Yeah. And I love that you're open to that. That's great.
Yeah. And I guess the big decision will be is like, where do they end up going to high school? My school or not my school? Whoa, I'm not ready for that decision yet.
Let's talk about food, because this is your new thing right now. I don't even think it's a new thing. You've always been passionate about food for as long as, okay, so we did a holistic nutritious baby class.
Yeah.
And we learned how to make our own baby food. And that was super important to make sure that we were doing a lot of things properly. And I feel like I took too much pressure from trying to do things too perfectly. And as I've, gotten a little more comfortable just with the personalities of my kids, and being okay with the way that society is, even that you are going to be up against a wall a lot of the time if you're going to be super, super stringent on the way that you parent. And not to say that that can be completely a bad thing. I feel like you should have your way that is important to you. But then on the flip side, having the ability to bend a little bit was what I had to learn. I was listening to this guy talk at a conference, and he was saying, you know what, I don't care if the kids eat perfectly. All I want them to do is just start with a meal in the morning. And if that meal in the morning is donuts, I'm okay with that. And I was like, what? Yeah. I was like, no, don't start. Like, that's going to be a hard thing to break if you're, But for him, it was the habit. It was the part of just making sure that they were even eating. And so, me sitting in a conference where we were supposed to be learning things to be able to pass on to the people that we were working with, I was like, there's no way. There's no way that I'm going to tell a young person that it's okay to eat donuts in the morning. And then I had to really stew on that for a little while and be like, well, okay, so you have your way, but your clients are going to be completely different from you. And the way that society is that parents are doing the grocery shopping, and parents are the ones that are doing the pickup and the drop offs, and parents are working full time. So maybe they don't have the ability to be cooking at home and buying organic food from the market and all the rest of it. So wrapping
Some
my
parents
head.
don't actually care either, right? Like there's like a group of parents that they eat all the fast food and they do all that. Like they don't, it's not a value of theirs.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So overcoming those kinds of things where you've got your own morals on food, how do you approach nutrition going forward?
Yeah, so this has been a huge struggle for me. So my older son, so first of all, I don't have any proof on this or scientific research on it.
Okay.
I do think there's a genetic factor. My second son eats just like my husband,
Okay.
and my first son eats just like me.
Okay.
And I introduce foods to them the exact same way.
Okay.
So I've always thought this. I don't know. I probably should research it and find out, but I do think it's, I don't know if it's the taste buds or the texture or what it is exactly, but I do feel like there's like that piece of it.
Yeah.
And the reason why I thought this is because the first recipe I did was roasted banana and then mashed it up and spoon fed that to them because that's what our nutrition person told us to do
Yeah.
when we
That was
took
my
that
first
course,
meal
right?
too. I baked that
Right.
banana for like an hour.
Totally. Totally. So Jackson ate like all of it. Like my first son ate all of it. My second son was gagging over it.
Okay.
And I knew I was like, oh no, this is going to be a problem. And that trend kept going. He kept gagging on things and then I remember recently making a meal and I was like, man, this meal is delicious. And my first son and I are like inhaling it. And my second son, Simon, goes to me, he's like, oh, I don't like it how these things are touching and the whole thing's gross. I just don't think I can do it. So
Yeah.
my husband, being a very good husband and not saying anything out loud, he whispers in my ear and he's like, Sarah, there's no chance I can eat that either. so so I've spent a lot of time thinking about this topic because there's a very fine line between getting your kid to eat healthy and creating a psychological disorder.
Okay.
So I always have that in the back of my head, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing to my child? But I have learned with Simon to have a ton of patience.
Yeah.
I have learned to allow him to feel like he's choosing foods.
Okay.
So even with fruit, for example, so let's say I have blueberries, I have raspberries, I have bananas, and I have apples. I'll be like, okay, so Simon, these are the fruits I have. What do you want?
Okay.
What would you eat? He feels like he has more control. So that has worked for us. I try not to put pressure on him because that doesn't really work well for him. It's not the right thing to do, I don't think, putting all this pressure on your kid to eat healthy. At the end of the day, Simon is a very smart boy, and I think he's going to decide as an adult whether or not he wants to put in the healthy eating principles that I have taught him. So
Okay.
what I've done is I've taught my kids how to eat properly. I've taught them behavioral things. I've taught them that drinking water is really good. I've taught them all these things in hopes that it might not be clicking right now, but it might click down the road.
And you also model it too. So they see you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But my younger son does see my husband sometimes taking a handful of chocolate chips. And then he's like, oh, handful of chocolate chips, eh, Dad? So, but I can't fault my husband. My husband exercises, he eats as well as he can. He's eating better now than he ever has in his life. So,
Yeah.
like, I mean, at the end of the day, food's food, and you got to just decide if it's a value for you. I just want them to know what it looks like. And yes, I model it. And then down the road, they can make their own choices. And you're right. It's scary to think that he might have behaviors that are hard to break. But I think that I just think he has to make the choice down the road as to
Yeah.
how he wants to be. Now, that being said, I make lists of foods that he enjoys. So I have a list that I know exactly what he'll eat because he's so fussy. We have smoothies regularly that I hide chia and flax and a little protein, and
Yep.
I even get greens, powdered greens in there that he doesn't know he's getting. And
Yep.
I am doing little things. When I bake stuff, I'll try to sneak flax, and he really likes pancakes, so I'll add flax and chia in there, and he doesn't even notice. And like there are little things that I do like that. Add veggie purees to sauces, and I certainly listen to his needs too. So I know he doesn't like his food touching, so I
Okay.
will never have his food touching on his plate.
Yep.
I know that if chicken has any sort of sauce or thing on it, he won't eat it. If it's
Yep.
hard, he won't eat it.
Yep.
So I've just accepted what he needs, and I just try to be accommodating.
With a lot of studies going into self-regulation, I think you're touching upon all of those things where you're
Yeah.
eliminating possible triggers that could cause bigger problems.
Mm.
And so just recognizing and being really thoughtful and mindful of, what your kids' needs are, that's really a special thing that you're doing on a regular basis, just so that he can have a chance of having a decent meal, and
Yeah.
that could be a huge outburst if it doesn't go well for certain kids, right?
Yes. And also I encourage him to do lots of tries. So like, for example, cook broccoli. Cook broccoli is a pretty big texture thing.
Okay.
Broccoli's very texture like.
Yeah.
So I'll say to him, all I'm asking you to do is try it.
Okay.
And then let's say we have broccoli next week. I put it on his plate. All I'm asking you to do is try it. And then I hope, he eventually acquires a taste for it. He might not, but hopefully he does.
So now with your clients that you want to be working with, what's your main goal? What do you want to, so it's a holistic nutrition course. So
Mm,
what does that look
yeah.
like?
They did teach you in the course how to to count your macros and all that sort of stuff. But I, I think it just depends on the type of person you are. I'm looking more at creating behavioral changes and implementing behaviors.
Okay.
So, I'll look at someone's food log for like 5 days, and I'll kind of see trends that I'm noticing, and then we'll implement behavior slowly. Maybe it's adding more water, or maybe it's adding more plants, or whatever it may be. And then we won't, and it's not cold turkey potentially either. So let's just say they're having like 2 pops a day.
Okay.
We would maybe cut that back to 1 pop a day.
Yeah.
And then once we've mastered that, we'll look at maybe drinking 1 pop a day 3 times a week in comparison to 5 times a week.
Yeah.
So it's all slow changes, like 1% better all the time.
Yeah.
And that's how you change habits, right? Is just by making 1% difference all the time. 1%, 1% over and over again.
And if you're working with a team and you can't check in with each individual kid, we know that there's so much that goes into sport beyond just the physical side of things. What would you say to help a coach that may just want to have some kind of advice for their team or the parents of the team for them to make something small adjustment that would be helpful?
Nutrition wise, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I think most of us don't drink enough water.
Okay.
So that would be my first thing, especially with these kids playing a lot of hockey or whatever sport they're playing.
Yeah.
I feel like water is a big thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Super simple
I think
too.
super simple and super accessible,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Everyone can drink, everyone has accessibility to water, right? So
Yeah.
I think I would start probably there. And then I would talk about just increasing plants and like fruits and vegetables. And eliminating processed foods is a huge one.
Yeah. So little by little.
Um,
So maybe you could have a team goal first, maybe a couple weeks drinking more water. And
yeah.
then next you could do it as a team goal, having a little more plant-based foods in for the next block. And then see at that point, maybe you could be having your teammate looking at their daily habits and kind of assess how much processed foods they have. And maybe as a team, they look at it together and say, okay, how can we make changes there? I think little by little, it'd
Yeah.
be cool.
Well, and I think because these kids are so naturally competitive,
Yeah.
you could actually make a game out of it, right?
Okay.
Like
Yep.
who can drink the most water? Like you could actually make it like these kids are naturally competitive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you could actually make it just like a fun, like it's not intense, but just make it like a fun little, like this kid gets a Subway gift card or a something gift card, Booster Juice gift card or something.
Yeah.
Um, just make it kind of fun and creative, right? Because kids love games.
Yeah. Well, I remember the very first time I ever wore a Fitbit, and I was connecting with different people, and I was like, oh man, this is going to be so bad for me because
Yeah.
you can see how much everybody's moving, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I have one friend who was my roommate in university and my teammate, and she was on a different time zone. So I was looking at her movement throughout the day, and I was like, I totally got her today. I got it. And then all of a sudden, it was like she had put her Fitbit on an animal that was just going crazy, where it was just like steps were going like crazy. And I was like, oh no, oh no. So then, of course, I'm like, how can I get more steps in? How can I get more in?
So my husband and I were like that during the pandemic. We were
Okay.
like totally competing against each other for steps. It was bad.
Yeah. You're like, well, I got to watch this show standing up and like,
Yeah.
place.
He still comes home from work and he's like, I got 30,000 today. And I was like, oh, good. And I'm like, oh, good for you. Meanwhile, checking my phone to see what I'm at.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, I want to finish up. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Impart some wisdom, more wisdom than you already have right now. What would you say, if you could say anything that you've learned over the course of your coaching and playing and teaching that would be helpful for anyone that's listening?
Um, I think what I said about the skill set,
Yeah,
so recognizing people are doing the best they can with the skill set that they have.
yeah,
For me, I really think I think that's number one.
yeah,
I also think just overall being kind.
yeah,
It's super simple, but to me, that's like something that's really, really important. And I think going back to expectations, I think just always keeping your expectations in check and like I'm a type of person that always has super high expectations.
uh-huh.
And I guess that's why I keep doing stuff and keep trying to grow. And I guess that leads me to the final thing where I really believe in a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset.
Okay,
I think that that's like really important. I feel like I'm always wanting to grow, and I always want others to think about growing. I think if you just have that fixed mindset, what are you gonna do kind of thing? Like I think just having that growth mindset, always wanting to improve yourself, always wanting to do better. And I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but I honestly feel like I'm capable of doing whatever I want. I actually feel like I'm capable to do anything because I can.
yeah,
Now, I don't think I can become a doctor tomorrow or something like that, but I actually believe that I am capable. And I believe that my children are capable. And I have high expectations for them, but they're realistic expectations. And I hope for them to have a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. And all those things that I said, I hope for my children. And I hope they believe that they can do anything because they can.
well, you're just such a great person. And obviously, you're such a great mom. You make an impact. I mean, for the amount of kids that you have touched upon the time that you've been in the schools is incredible. So you are definitely making this world a better place. And I am so thankful that you chatted with me today. And thank you for being my friend.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, we're going to sign off here. This has been Sarah Zinkie, and she's just an awesome person. I hope that she has impacted some encouragement for all of us to just be a little more kind, a little more patient, and to have some more empathy with each other. We're going to be continuing these conversations. I really hope that you follow along. If you would like to know when these episodes come out, please go to my website, rihannaposkin.com, and you can sign up there to get the messages right to your inbox. And I also send out information on strength and conditioning for youth sports and for youth coaches. So don't miss anything. You can sign up there. Thanks so much, you guys. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye.